My boyfriend called me cheap and selfish for refusing to hand over $50,000 for his mother's fake heart surgery, moments before they threatened to have me institutionalized just to steal my inheritance. I'm shaking so hard I can barely hold this microphone because I just watched the police drag the man I loved and his mother out of my apartment in handcuffs. How does a person look you in the eye, say they love you, and then plant drugs in your home to blackmail you? I let Liam move into my tiny studio because I was desperate for love. And within weeks, he moved his controlling mother in, forced me to sleep on a cramped love seat while they took my bed, and turned my sanctuary into a prison of gaslighting and theft. I thought I was being a supportive partner, but I was just a host body for two parasites who thought I was an easy target because of my father's money. They stole my grandmother's pearls, convinced me I was losing my mind, and tried to destroy my life when I finally said no. I won the war. But looking at my empty apartment, I feel like I lost my soul. How do I ever trust another human being after surviving this? My name is Avery Miller. I am 19 years old, a sophomore studying visual arts at Parsons in New York City. To the casual observer, or perhaps a stranger passing me on the bustling streets of the East Village, I look like just another struggling student trying to find her artistic voice in the chaos of Manhattan. I live in a fourth-floor walk-up, a studio apartment so narrow that if I stretch my arms out, I can almost touch both walls. My diet consists mostly of instant noodles, discounted fruit, and the occasional splurge on a good cup of coffee. I paint, I sketch, and I budget every single cent that flows in from my part-time job at the campus gallery. But that is a curated reality. It is a costume I wear because I am desperate to prove a point. The truth is, my last name carries weight in the circles I try to avoid. My father is Robert Miller, a man whose name is etched onto the donor walls of hospitals and museums across the state. I grew up in a world of suffocating velvet curtains, silent dinners at long mahogany tables, and a checkbook that was supposed to solve every emotional deficit. I ran away from that life, or at least, I tried to. I wanted to prove that Avery Miller could survive without Daddy's platinum card, that I could build a life that was messy, authentic, and entirely my own. I wanted love that was not transactional. I wanted someone who looked at me and saw a person, not a portfolio. And I thought I had found him. His name was Liam Carter, 19 years old, a pre-law student with a jawline that could cut glass and a smile that made you forget he had ever been late. He was charming, intelligent, and possessed that kind of effortless confidence that usually masks a deep-seated insecurity. We had been dating for 6 months. 6 months of late-night study sessions, walks through Central Park, and me convincing myself that his occasional forgetfulness was just a quirk of his genius. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. It was our 6-month anniversary. We were seated at a corner booth in a steakhouse in Midtown, the kind of place where the waiters wear white gloves and the menu does not have prices listed next to the specials. The lighting was dim, casting a golden, romantic glow over the white tablecloths. The air smelled of seared meat, expensive cologne, and old money. It was Liam's idea, he insisted. He said a girl like me deserved to be treated like a queen, even if just for one night. I remember looking at him across the table, the candlelight flickering in his blue eyes. He looked handsome in his navy blazer, though I knew he had borrowed the tie from his roommate. To us, Liam said, raising his glass of red wine. It was a Cabernet Sauvignon, a bottle that cost $80. I had suggested we stick to water or a house glass, but Liam had waved his hand dismissively, saying we only live once, to us. I whispered, clinking my glass against his. The dinner was exquisite, yet a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach with every course that arrived. Liam ordered the Wagyu beef sliders as an appetizer, then the ribeye for himself. He ordered sides of truffle mac and cheese and grilled asparagus. He ate with gusto, talking about his mock trial classes, about how he was going to dismantle the corporate legal system from the inside once he passed the bar. I mostly listened, picking at my salad. I was happy, or at least, I was performing happiness. But beneath the surface, a calculator was running in my head. 80 for the wine, 60 for the steak, 20 for the appetizer. The total was climbing higher and higher, threatening to breach the invisible ceiling of my comfort zone. Then came the check. The waiter, a solemn man with graying hair, placed the black leather folder on the table between us. It sat there like a loaded gun. Liam wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, a satisfied sigh escaping his lips. He reached for his back pocket. Then he patted the front breast pocket of his blazer, then the side pockets. The performance began. His eyebrows knitted together. He shifted in the leather booth, lifting one hip, then the other. His movements became frantic, a pantomime of distress that felt slightly too large for the room. "Oh, no," Liam muttered, his voice dropping to a whisper. "No, no, no. What is it?" I asked, though a cold shiver of dread had already washed over me. I knew what it was. I think, deep down, I knew this was coming before we even sat down. "My wallet," Liam said, looking up at me with wide, panicked eyes. "Avery, I think I left it on the dresser back at the dorm. I changed jackets at the last second. I was so focused on looking good for you that So you Ding Hao Ling. Do God. I am such an idiot." He put his head in his hands, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair. "This is humiliating. I planned this whole night. I wanted to treat you." I sat there, frozen. The bill was surely over $300. That was my grocery budget for the entire month. That was the money I had set aside for new acrylic paints. "It is okay," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "Do not worry about it. Liam, accidents happen." "No, it is not okay," he hissed, seemingly angry at himself. "I am the man. I should be taking care of this. I feel terrible. Avery, truly." He looked at me with such intensity, such vulnerability, that my heart softened. He was a struggling student too, right? He was trying. He just made a mistake. "I have it covered," I said, reaching into my purse. My hand trembled slightly as I pulled out the emergency credit card my father had forced upon me, the one I swore I would only use for medical emergencies or flight tickets home. This felt like a betrayal of my own principles, a crack in the foundation of independence I was trying to build. I placed the card in the folder. Liam watched me do it. For a split second, the panic in his eyes vanished, replaced by a calmness that unsettled me. But it happened so fast I thought I imagined it. "You are the best," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I will pay you back the second we get to your place. I promise. I will Venmo you instantly." "It is fine, Liam," I lead. "Really." The ride back to my apartment was quiet. Liam was affectionate, keeping his arm around my shoulder in the back of the Uber. whispering about how lucky he was to have a girlfriend who was so understanding, so low maintenance. I rested my head on his shoulder, closing my eyes, trying to suppress the nagging voice in the back of my head that sounded suspiciously like my father. People treat you how you let them treat you. Avery. We arrived at my building in the East Village, just as a light drizzle began to fall. The stairwell smelled of old wood and damp plaster as we climbed the 4 flights to my apartment. Inside, my sanctuary felt smaller than usual with Liam's presence filling the space. He took off his navy blazer, shaking off the raindrops. "I am going to use the bathroom," he announced. "Do you have any wine left?" That steak made me thirsty. "Check the fridge," I said, dropping my keys on the small table by the door. Liam hung his blazer on the coat rack near the entrance, a flimsy metal stand that wobbled under the weight of too many coats. He turned and walked toward the bathroom, humming a tune under his breath. He seemed to have completely forgotten his earlier humiliation. He seemed Saoyuting Haling. 2 hashes greater than light. I walked over to the coat rack to hang up my own trench coat. The stand was overcrowded. As I tried to wedge my coat onto a hook, I bumped Liam's blazer. It happened in slow motion. The heavy fabric of his jacket swung. The momentum shifted. And then, gravity did its work. A heavy, dark object slid out of the inside pocket of Liam's blazer and hit the hardwood floor with a solid, undeniable thud. Saoyuting Hao Ling. Zwei Raute ist größer als I Froze. I looked down, lying on the scuffed wooden floorboards. Illuminated by the soft light of the hallway lamp was a brown leather wallet. My breath hitched in my throat. It was Liam's wallet, the one he had supposedly left on his dresser in the dorm room 3 miles away. The one he had frantically searched for at the restaurant while the waiter watched us with pity. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A painful, rhythmic warning. "Pick it up," the voice in my head commanded. "Check it." I crouched down, my fingers brushing against the cool leather. It felt heavy. I opened it. There was his student identification. There was his driver's license. And tucked neatly into the billfold were 3 crisp $20 bills. Not enough to pay for the dinner, certainly, but enough to prove that he had not forgotten it. He had it the whole time. He had sat there, eaten a $60 steak, drank $80 wine, and performed a monologue of distress, all while feeling the weight of this wallet against his chest. Why? Why would he do that? Was he testing me? Was he just cheap? Or was it something worse? The sound of the toilet flushing snapped me back to reality. Panic surged through me. If he saw me holding it, he would know that I knew he was a liar. But more than that, it would cause a fight. It would ruin the night. It would ruin the perfect couple image I was clinging to so desperately. I was terrified of the confrontation. I was terrified of being single again, of admitting to my father that he was right about boys like Liam. So, I did the cowardly thing. I did the thing that would seal my fate for the months to come. I snapped the wallet shut and shoved it back into the inside pocket of his blazer. I hung the jacket up carefully, smoothing out the fabric as if erasing the evidence of my discovery. "Babe?" Liam's voice called out from the kitchen area. "We are out of Pinot Grigio. Do you want me to run down and grab a beer?" I stood there for a moment, staring at the jacket. I felt a wave of nausea. I should have screamed. I should have thrown the wallet at him. Instead, I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face, and turned around. "No, I am fine," I called back, my voice steady, betraying nothing of the storm raging inside me. "Let us just watch a movie." I walked into the living room, leaving the truth hanging on the coat rack by the door, pretending that I did not just see the first crack in the mask of the man I loved. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. I told myself I was overreacting, but as I sat next to him on the sofa, and he put his arm around me, his touch felt different. It felt heavy, and for the first time, I realized that the warmth radiating from him was not love. It was the heat of a predator who realized he had just found prey that would not bite back. The wallet incident should have been the end. In a movie where the protagonist is smart, strong, and decisive, the credits would have rolled right then and there. She would have thrown the blazer at him, demanded her $300 back, and changed the locks. But I was not the heroine of an empowering blockbuster yet. I was a 19-year-old girl, terrified of being alone in a city that eats lonely people alive. So, I buried the memory, I shoveled dirt over it, planted flowers on top, and pretended the rot was not spreading beneath the surface. 2 weeks passed. The air in New York turned crisper, signaling the arrival of late autumn. My bank account was still recovering from the steakhouse dinner, but Liam seemed determined to test the limits of my financial anxiety. We were sitting in a trendy coffee shop in Soho on a Tuesday afternoon. I was nursing a lukewarm black coffee because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, while Liam was halfway through a caramel macchiato with extra foam and a croissant. He was scrolling through Instagram, his thumb flicking upward with a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. "Look at this," Liam said, shoving his phone screen into my face. I leaned back, adjusting my eyes. It was a video of an influencer couple. The girl, a blonde with perfect teeth, was surprising her boyfriend with a brand new gaming console and a pair of designer sneakers. The caption read, "He treats me like a queen, so I treat him like a king. Number spoiled." "That is sweet," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Liam sehilt, a long, dramatic exhalation of air that ruffled his bangs. He took the phone back and stared at it wistfully. "It is not just sweet, Avery. It is about reciprocity. It is about understanding that a relationship is a two-way street." He took a bite of his croissant, crumbs falling onto his black turtleneck. "You know, we took that quiz last month. My love language is receiving gifts. It is not about the material value. Obviously, I am not shallow. It is about the thought. It is about knowing that your partner sees you and wants to elevate your lifestyle." He paused, looking me directly in the eyes. His gaze was intense, analytical. "Sometimes I feel like you do not really get that part of me. You are very Saoyutsinghaling. Too hash is greater than practical, which is fine. But sometimes practical feels a lot like indifferent." The word stung. Indifferent? I had paid for his Wagyu beef. I had listened to his hours of complaining about his professors. I had edited his essays. "I am not indifferent," I defended myself, my voice small. "I just Saoyutsinghaling. Tvo, I am on a budget." "Liam, you know that. So is she." Liam pointed at the phone screen. "That girl is a student too. It is about priorities. Avery, if you wanted to, you would..." That phrase hung in the air between us like toxic smoke. "If you wanted to, you would." It was a weaponized cliche, designed to make any hesitation on my part feel like a lack of love. I went home that night feeling a heavy stone of guilt in my chest. Was I being cheap? Was I holding back? I looked around my studio apartment. It was filled with my art supplies, my clutter. Maybe I was too focused on myself. Maybe I needed to show him, in a tangible way, that he mattered to me. I wanted him to look at me the way that guy on Instagram looked at his girlfriend, with pure, unadulterated adoration. The next day, I skipped my afternoon art history lecture. I walked into a high-end department store on Fifth Avenue. The air conditioning was freezing, and the store smelled of expensive perfume and leather. I felt out of place in my paint-stained denim jacket, but I marched toward the men's accessories counter with a singular mission. I wanted to buy him a watch. Liam had mentioned months ago that he wanted to look more presidential for his mock trial competitions. I spent an hour looking at the glass display cases. My eyes kept drifting to the price tags, wincing at the numbers. 200, 300, 700. Can I help you, miss? A sales associate asked, eyeing me skeptically. I am looking for something classic, I said, trying to sound confident. For a law student, she pulled out a sleek chronograph watch. It had a silver face and a rich, chocolate brown leather strap. It was elegant, sophisticated, and understated. It looked like something a young attorney would wear. It is beautiful, I whispered. It is on sale, she said. $500, down from $750. $500. That was my entire emergency fund. That was the money I had saved from selling 2 small paintings last summer. It was supposed to be my safety net. I thought about the wallet. I thought about the steak dinner. But then I thought about Liam's disappointed face in the coffee shop. I thought about proving him wrong. I wanted to buy my way out of the insecurity he had planted in me. I will take it, I said, when I handed over my debit card. My hand shook. The transaction approved. I walked out of the store with a small, velvet-lined box in a glossy bag, feeling a mix of nausea and exhilaration. I had done it. I was the good girlfriend. That evening, I went over to Liam's dorm room. It was a mess, as usual, smelling of stale pizza and dirty laundry. He was playing video games on his bed, wearing sweatpants. Hey, he said, barely looking up from the screen. You are early. I have a surprise for you, I said, standing in the middle of the room, clutching the bag behind my back. He paused the game. He swiveled around in his chair, raising an eyebrow. Oh, did you bring food? Better, I said. I stepped forward and handed him the bag. I was thinking about what you said yesterday, about love languages, and I wanted you to know that I do prioritize you. Liam took the bag. He looked at the logo on the front, and his eyes widened slightly. He reached inside and pulled out the box. He opened it slowly. I held my breath, waiting for the smile, waiting for the hug, waiting for him to say, Avery, you are crazy. This is too much. I love you. Liam stared at the watch. The silence stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. His expression did not soften. Instead, his nose wrinkled slightly, as if he had just smelled spoiled milk. Brown, he said. My heart dropped into my stomach. What? The strap? Liam said, lifting the watch out of the box and dangling it by the leather band. It is brown. Avery, you know, I only wear black belts and black shoes. This clashes with literally everything I own. I felt the blood drain from my face. Saudinghaling. 2 hashes greater than I thought. It looked classic. The woman at the store said. The woman at the store just wanted a commission. Liam interrupted, letting out a scoff. He tossed the watch back into the velvet box carelessly. It looks kind of cheap. Honestly, the brown makes it look like something an old grandfather would wear. It does not look modern. He looked up at me, his blue eyes cold and critical. There was no gratitude. There was only judgment. Did you keep the receipt? He asked. Sao Yu Jing Haoling. Get to. Yes, I think so. I stammered, fighting back the tears that were burning the corners of my eyes. I spent $500 on that. Liam, it is not cheap. Well, you got ripped off, he said flatly. He sighed again, the same dramatic sigh from the coffee shop. Look, Avery, I appreciate the effort, I guess, but this just proves my point. You do not pay attention to the details. If you really watched me, if you really observed my style, you would know I hate brown leather. It is just Sao Yu Jing Haoling. 2# is greater than disappointing. He stood up and walked over to me, placing his hands on my shoulders. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the weight of my failure crushing me. I had emptied my savings account to make him happy, and he was looking at me like I had handed him a bag of trash. Next time, he said, his voice dropping to a patronizing whisper, just ask me what I want, or maybe just give me the cash. That way you do not waste money on things that are not up to my standard. Okay? He leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. It was a dry, dismissive kiss. I am sorry, I whispered. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I just wanted to do something nice. I know, Liam said, turning back to his video game. You tried. Now, come here and give me a back rub. My shoulders are killing me from carrying all this stress about my exams. I walked over to the bed and sat behind him. As I dug my thumbs into his shoulders, watching him unpause his game, I looked at the velvet box sitting discarded on his messy desk. Next to an empty soda can, I had apologized for giving him a $500 gift. Inside my head, a voice was screaming. It was screaming that he was ungrateful, that he was cruel, that he was entitled. But I strangled that voice. I forced myself to believe that he was right. I had messed up. I had bought the wrong color. I was the one with the bad taste. I just needed to try harder. I just needed to be better. If I tried hard enough, eventually, he would have to love me the way I wanted to be loved, right? The banging on my door started at 2 a.m. It was not a polite knock. It was a frantic, rhythmic pounding that vibrated through the thin walls of my apartment, shaking the frame sketches I had carefully hung in the entryway. I jolted awake, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Outside, the October rain was lashing against the single window of my studio, turning the city lights into blurred, weeping streaks of neon. I pulled my robe tight around me and shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Liam. He looked like a drowned rat. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His designer windbreaker was soaked through, and he was flanked by 2 enormous, black suitcases that took up the entire width of the hallway. I unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. Liam? I blinked, the sleep still heavy in my eyes. What is going on? It is the middle of the night. He did not answer immediately. He just pushed past me, dragging the wet suitcases over my threshold. The wheels left too long, muddy tracks on my clean hardwood floor. He dropped the handles with a heavy clatter and turned to face me, shivering dramatically. They kicked me out, he said. His voice was laced with a mixture of rage and victimization. Can you believe it? The housing office locked me out of my room. My key card stopped working at midnight. What? I closed the door, blocking out the draft from the hallway. Why would they do that? Liam began to pace around my tiny living area, stripping off his wet jacket and tossing it onto my armchair without asking. It is a glitch. He spat out. A system error. I went down to the night manager, and he said my tuition payment from my dad had not cleared yet. It is obviously a banking mistake. My dad sent the wire transfer last week. But you know how incompetent these university bureaucrats are. They see a delay, and they just pull the plug. No warning. Nothing. He looked at me, his blue eyes wide and pleading, the anger melting into a look of pathetic helplessness. I had nowhere else to go. Avery. I walked 6 blocks in the rain with all my stuff. I felt like a refugee. My stomach twisted. I looked at the suitcases. They were not overnight bags. They were the kind of luggage you pack when you are leaving forever. But, Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than why do you have all your stuff? I asked gently. If it is just a glitch, will it not be fixed by morning? Liam froze for a split second. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, but he smoothed it over instantly. I did not want to leave my valuables in a room I could not access. He said smoothly. Plus, I figured, Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than well. I figured this was the universe giving us a sign. A sign? Look at this place, Liam said, gesturing around my 400 square foot studio. It is cozy. It is us. Why am I paying thousands of dollars to a dorm that treats me like a criminal when I could be here? With you, we are practically living together anyway. This just makes it official. He did not ask. He stated it. He walked over to my kitchenette, opened the fridge, and pulled out a carton of orange juice. He drank directly from the carton, ignoring the glass sitting on the drying rack 3 inches away. Liam, I started, anxiety bubbling up in my throat. I have a lease. The landlord is strict about long-term guests, and it is so small. There is only one closet. Liam slammed the fridge door shut. The noise made me jump. Wow, he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Just wow. Avery, Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than what? I am standing here, soaked, homeless because of a clerical error, and you are worried about closet space? He shook his head, looking at me with deep disappointment. You talk so much about independence, about being a modern woman, but the second your boyfriend needs a little support, you turn into this selfish, territorial landlord. Is this your idea of partnership? Or is it only a partnership when I am buying you dinner? The accusation hit me like a slap. He was twisting reality again, using my own values against me. I wanted to scream that I had paid for the last 3 dinners, that I had bought him a $500 watch he hated. But the fear of being selfish, the very thing my father always accused my mother of being, paralyzed me. I am not being selfish, I whispered. I am just Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than overwhelmed. Well, so am I. Liam snapped. I need a shower. I feel gross. We can talk about how you are going to make this up to me in the morning. He grabbed a towel from my shelf and marched into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. I stood alone in the center of the room, the sound of the shower starting up a few seconds later. The muddy tracks on the floor seemed to mock me. I grabbed a rag and started to wipe them up, on my hands and knees, scrubbing at the dirt Liam had dragged into my sanctuary. As I scrubbed near the suitcases, I noticed something. The zipper on the larger suitcase was busted. It had split open during his trek in the rain, exposing the contents. I reached out to zip it back up, to be helpful, but the fabric was jammed. I tugged at it. The gap widened. Inside, I did not see clothes. I saw paper, stacks and stacks of paper, haphazardly shoved in with dirty laundry. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. It is a scratching at the back of your brain that you know you should ignore. But you cannot. I glanced at the bathroom door. The water was running loud. He would be in there for at least 20 minutes. Liam took notoriously long showers. My hand moved before my conscience could stop it. I reached into the suitcase and pulled out a handful of the crumpled papers. I sat back on my heels, unfolding the first document under the dim light of my floor lamp. It was a letter from the university housing department. It was dated 3 months ago. Final notice of eviction. I scanned the text, my breath catching in my throat. Failure to remit payment for spring and fall semesters. Outstanding balance, $12,000. It was not a glitch. It was not a bank error. He had not paid his housing fees for nearly a year. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. Liam had lied to my face, effortlessly, looking me in the eyes and fabricating a story about his father and a wire transfer. I unfolded the next piece of paper. It was a printout from a bank account, but it was not a student checking account. It was a transaction history for a credit card in his name. DraftKings, -$500. FanDuel, -$200. MGM Online, -$1,000. Cash advance, $300. The list went on and on, pages of it, red numbers, negative signs. I felt bile rise in my throat. The dinner at the steakhouse, the forgotten wallet, the demand for the expensive watch. It all clicked into place like the tumblers of a lock. Liam was not just broke, he was a gambler. He was bleeding money he did not have, chasing a high he could not catch. And he was using me to subsidize his lifestyle while he threw his tuition money into the void of online betting. I looked at the documents in my trembling hands. This was it. This was the smoking gun. This was the moment I should have marched into that bathroom, turned off the water, and thrown him and his suitcases out into the rain. A rational person would have called the police. A rational person would have realized that the man in the shower was a parasite. But then, a thought crept in, a dark, insidious thought that was fueled by 19 years of trying to be the opposite of my father. My father, Robert Miller, would have cut Liam off. He would have destroyed him. He would have viewed him as a bad investment and liquidated the asset. My father had no mercy for weakness. If I kicked Liam out now, I would be just like my father, cold, ruthless, transactional. I looked at the bathroom door again. I imagined Liam in there, washing away the rain. I imagined him terrified, addicted, drowning in debt, and too proud to ask for help. Maybe his arrogance was just a shield. Maybe he was lying because he was ashamed. I can fix him, the voice in my head whispered. It was a seductive, poisonous lie. I can be the one who saves him. I can help him budget. I can help him break the addiction. If I save him, then he will owe me. He will love me for real because I stayed when everyone else would have left. I was not just a victim of his manipulation. I was becoming a volunteer. The water in the bathroom stopped. Panic surged through me. I scrambled to shove the papers back into the suitcase. I jammed them deep under a pile of boxers and sweatshirts, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I managed to pull the zipper somewhat closed, just as the bathroom door handle turned. Liam stepped out, a cloud of steam billowing around him. He had a towel wrapped around his waist, his wet hair slicked back. He looked clean. He looked innocent. He looked like the boy I fell in love with, not the monster represented by the papers in the suitcase. Man, that felt good. he sighed, rubbing his face. He looked at me, sitting on the floor next to his luggage. What are you doing down there? I froze. I forced a smile onto my face, a mask of compliance that felt tight and unnatural. Just, 小玉静好灵, 2# is greater than trying to make room for your stuff. I lead. You were right. The closet is bigger than it looks. Liam grinned. It was a triumphant, predatory grin. He walked over and offered me a hand to pull me up. See? He said, pulling me into a damp embrace. I knew you would come around. We are going to be great here. Avery, think of all the money I will save on rent. I can finally focus on my studies without stressing about those housing office idiots. He kissed the top of my head. I stood there, stiff in his arms, feeling the dampness of his skin seep into my clothes. Yeah, I whispered, closing my eyes. We will figure it out. I knew the truth now. I held the secret of his ruin in my mind, but instead of using it as a sword to cut him loose, I decided to swallow it. I decided to let the parasite burrow deeper, convincing myself that if I fed him enough of my blood, eventually he would be full. I did not know then that parasites are never full. They only stop eating when the host is dead. My apartment, once a sanctuary of lavender scents and quiet jazz, had transformed into a war zone of dirty socks and empty energy drink cans. It had been 3 weeks since Liam moved in, and the romantic illusion of playing house had shattered faster than a dropped mirror. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped in 2 thick blankets, my teeth chattering audibly. It was mid-November in New York City. Outside, the wind whipped down the avenues, stripping the last of the autumn leaves from the trees. Inside, it was even colder. The air conditioner unit in the window was humming a relentless, mechanical drone. It was set to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Liam sat at my small desk, which he had commandeered the moment he arrived. He was wearing a thick, gray hoodie, headphones over his ears, and was furiously typing on his laptop. He claimed he was working on a crucial brief for his constitutional law class. I stood up, my feet numb inside my wool socks, and walked over to the window. I reached for the dial of the air conditioner. Do not, Liam said. He did not turn around. He did not take off his headphones. He just knew. Liam, it is freezing, I said, my voice trembling. It is November. We do not need the air conditioner on. We need the heat. He spun his chair around, pulling the headphones down around his neck. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a tight, irritated set to his jaw. We have been over this. Avery, he said, speaking slowly as if addressing a toddler. My brain functions better in the cold. Heat makes me sluggish. Do you want me to fail this semester? Do you want my grade point average to tank because you cannot put on another sweater? I am wearing 2 sweaters, I cried, frustration finally bubbling over. And look at this. I slammed a piece of paper onto the desk next to his laptop. It was the electricity bill that had arrived in the mail that morning, $340. I stated, that is triple my usual bill. Triple. Liam, I cannot afford this. I literally cannot pay this. Liam picked up the bill, glancing at it with a look of utter boredom. He tossed it back onto the desk as if it were a gum wrapper. Money, 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 he said, rubbing his temples. Is that all you ever think about? It is so unattractive. Avery, it really is. I have to think about it because I am the only one paying it. I snapped. You said you would help with utilities. You have been here 3 weeks, and you have not contributed a single cent. You eat my food. You use my electricity. You use my Wi-Fi to gamble. I stopped. I had not meant to say the last part. The air in the room shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Liam stood up slowly. He towered over me, using his height to intimidate. To gamble? He repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you think I am doing? I am trading. Avery. It is called investing. I am trying to build a future for us, for our potential family. And you are nagging me about a $300 electric bill? I saw the papers in your suitcase. I whispered, backing away until my legs hit the bed frame. I saw the debts. Liam did not flinch. He did not deny it. Instead, he laughed, a cold, dry sound. You went through my personal property, he said, shaking his head with a look of mock pity. Wow, I knew you were insecure, but I did not think you were a violator of privacy. That is a felony in some states. Stop deflecting, I yelled, though my voice cracked. You owe thousands of dollars. You are not trading. You are losing. And now you are making me lose too. Liam took a step closer, invading my personal space. He put a finger under my chin, tilting my head up. Listen to me, he said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. I am going through a temporary liquidity crisis. It happens to every great businessman. Musk, Bezos, they all had moments of debt, but I am going to bounce back. I am going to be rich. Avery, and when I am, I will not be counting pennies like a peasant. I thought you were different. I thought you were a partner, but you are just like everyone else. Transactional. You only care about me when it is convenient for your bank account. He pulled away, looking at me with disgust. If the roles were reversed, he said, if you were the one struggling and trying to build a career, I would carry you. I would pay every bill and never mention it once, because that is what love is. But clearly, you do not know what love is. I stood there, stunned. He had done it again. He had taken my valid concern, the fact that he was bleeding me dry, and twisted it until I felt like the villain. Was I being transactional? The doubt crept in like black mold. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just like my father, valuing money over people. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than I just need help with the bill. I stammered, my anger deflating into shame. I cannot deal with this negative energy right now, Liam declared, turning back to his computer. I am going to take a walk. I need to clear my head so I can actually study. He grabbed his coat and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door hard enough to make the windows rattle. I sank onto the floor, pulling the blankets over my head, and cried. I cried for the money I did not have. I cried for the boy I thought he was. And mostly, I cried because I felt trapped in my own home. An hour later, I realized he had left his laptop open. I should not have looked. I knew that, but the seed of suspicion had bloomed into a full forest of paranoia. I walked over to the desk. The screen was not showing a law brief. It was not showing a stock trading platform. It was on a folder in his browser history, labeled Avery. My heart stopped. I clicked on it. It was not photos of us. It was not sentimental emails. It was a collection of digital receipts and screenshots. He had been tracking my spending. He had screenshots of my Venmo transactions. He had photos of my art supplies with estimated prices listed next to them. He was auditing me, and then I saw the physical file folder sitting under his mouse pad. It was a manila folder I kept hidden in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. A drawer I never opened. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely lift the cover. Inside was a single document, a bank statement from the First National Bank of New York. It listed the account holder as Avery Miller. The balance at the bottom was bold and black, $50,000. This was the document my father had made me create when I turned 18. It was a trust fund from my grandmother, but it was locked, frozen. I could not touch a dime of it until I turned 25 or got married. My father called it the in case of emergency fund, but he held the only key to anyone else. It looked like I had $50,000 in liquid cash sitting in a checking account. Liam must have found it while I was in class. He had rummaged through my underwear drawer, found the hidden compartment, and found this. The door handle turned. I gasped, dropping the folder onto the desk. Liam walked in. He brought the cold air of the street with him, but his face was no longer angry. He looked Sauutsinghaling, dois cardinal, é maior que radiante. He looked like he had just won the lottery. He saw the folder on the desk. He saw me standing there, pale and terrified. For a second, I thought he would explode again. I thought he would scream about privacy. Instead, a slow, sickening smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a wolf that realizes the sheep is not just wool. It is meat. Avery, he purred, closing the door softly behind him and locking the deadbolt. He walked over to me, bypassing the tension, bypassing the fight we just had. He picked up the bank statement, holding it like it was a holy scripture. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked, his voice dripping with a terrifying sweetness. "Why did you let us fight over a $300 electric bill when you have this?" He tapped the number 50,000 with his index finger. "It is Sauutsinghaling. 2# is greater than it is not what you think." I stammered, stepping back. "I cannot access that. It is frozen." "Osh." Liam hushed me, stepping closer and wrapping his arms around my rigid body. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling deeply. "Do not lie to me anymore. Baby, no more secrets. We are partners. Remember, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine." He pulled back to look at me. The cold, dead look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a feverish, greedy sparkle. "This changes everything," he whispered. "We are going to have such a good life. Avery, you, me, and our future. I forgive you for being cheap earlier. I understand now. You were just protecting our nest egg." He kissed me. It was possessive. It felt like a branding iron. "By the way," he said, pulling away and casually tossing his coat onto the floor, "my mom is coming to visit. She will be here tomorrow. I told her we have plenty of space." My blood ran cold. "You're Sauutsinghaling. Dva, Mom?" "Yes." Liam grinned, looking back at the bank statement on the desk. "She is going to love you, especially now that we are on the same page financially. We have a lot of planning to do, Avery. A lot of planning." I looked at the number on the paper, $50,000. To him, it was a jackpot. To me, it was a target painted on my back. And now, he was calling in reinforcements. The transformation in Liam was terrifying. For 3 weeks, he had been a brooding storm cloud, snapping at me for breathing too loudly while he invested our electricity bill away. But the morning after he found the bank statement, he woke up like a golden retriever. He made coffee. He actually put his dirty socks in the hamper. he hummed while he wiped down the counters I had already cleaned the night before. It was a performance. I knew it, but the part of me that was starved for affection, the part that was terrified of conflict, wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to believe that the $50,000, even though I could not touch it, had somehow bought me peace. Then the doorbell rang. Liam practically sprinted to the door. He threw it open with a flourish, revealing a woman who looked like she had just stepped out of a country club brochure, albeit one from 20 years ago. Deborah Carter was a petite woman with helmet-like blonde hair that did not move when she turned her head. She wore a pastel pink blazer, white capris, and enough gold jewelry to set off a metal detector from a block away. She dragged a suitcase behind her that was larger than my bathtub. "Mother," Liam exclaimed, engulfing her in a hug. "You made it. Welcome to our humble abode." Deborah pulled away, patting her hair to ensure not a single strand had been displaced by her son's affection. Her eyes, sharp and blue like Liam's, scanned the room. They swept over my easel, my small kitchenette, and finally landed on me. She did not smile. She assessed. It was the look a butcher gives a piece of meat, deciding if it is grade A or scrap. "So," she said, her voice raspy from years of what I assumed were Virginia Slims. "This is the artist. This is Avery," Liam corrected gently, pulling me forward by the waist. His grip was tight, possessive. "Avery, this is my mother, Deborah, the most important woman in the world. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Carter," I said, extending my hand. She looked at my hand, which had a smudge of blue oil paint near the thumb, and offered me 2 limp fingers in return. "Miss Carter," she corrected, "and do try not to get paint on my blazer. Dear, it is silk." She breezed past me, dragging her suitcase wheels over the hardwood floor with a deafening rumble. She stood in the center of my 400-square-foot universe and did a 360-degree turn. "It is so Ding Hao Ling. 2# is greater than intimate," she declared, the word dripping with disdain. "Very bohemian. I suppose this is how students live these days. Though Liam, you told me it was an apartment, not a closet. It is temporary." "Mom," Liam said quickly, shooting me a warning look to keep my mouth shut. "Once Avery and I sort out our assets, we will be upgrading. Big time." Deborah nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on the bank statement that Liam had conveniently left pinned to the corkboard above the desk. A small, knowing smile played on her lips. "Well," she said, dropping her handbag onto my dining table, "I suppose I can make do. Where do I sleep?" There was a silence. My apartment had 1 bed, a queen-sized mattress that took up half the room. "I can take the couch," Liam volunteered heroically. "You take the bed." "Mom, Avery and I will figure it out." I blinked. "Wait, Liam, the couch does not pull out. It is a love seat. You cannot fit on it." Liam turned to me, his eyes widening with that fake, pleading innocence. "Babe, obviously, Mom takes the bed. She has sciatica. She cannot sleep on a couch. I will take the floor. You can take the love seat. It is just for a few days." I looked at Deborah. She was already unpacking her toiletries onto my dresser, pushing my framed photos of my friends aside to make room for her anti-aging creams. She was not asking. She was taking. "Fine," I whispered. "I will take the couch." "Wonderful," Deborah said, not looking up. "Now, I am famished. That train ride was dreadful. What is for lunch?" "I hope you do not expect me to eat takeout," Sodium is terrible for my complexion. For the next 4 hours, I became a servant in my own home. Liam sat at the foot of the bed, my bed, rubbing his mother's feet while they chatted about people I did not know. They laughed about poor Aunt Carol, who married a mechanic. They critiqued the neighbors. They spoke in a rhythm that excluded me completely. Meanwhile, I was in the kitchenette, sweating over a hot stove, trying to make a risotto with the limited ingredients I had. Every few minutes, Deborah would call out a command. Avery, dear, less salt. Liam has a sensitive palate. Avery, make sure the water is filtered. I cannot drink tap water. It tastes like rust. Avery, do you not have any real napkins? Paper towels are so tacky. When I finally served the food, placing the bowls on the small table, I felt a heavy exhaustion settling into my bones. I sat down, ready to take a bite. Deborah took one spoonful, chewed slowly, and then placed her spoon down with a clatter. It is mushy, she announced. It is risotto, I said through gritted teeth. It is supposed to be creamy. There is a difference between creamy and baby food, she said, pushing the bowl away. Liam, how can you eat this? Liam, who had been shoveling the food into his mouth a second ago, stopped immediately. He looked at his mother, then at me. It is a little overcooked. Babe, he said apologetically. Mom is a gourmet cook, so her standards are high. Maybe you should take some notes while she is here. Learn a thing or two. I stared at him. The betrayal was so casual, so effortless. He threw me under the bus to please her without blinking. I am not a chef, I said, my voice trembling. I am a painter. Well, painting does not put dinner on the table, does it? Deborah quipped, sipping her water. Unless, of course, you have a trust fund, which Liam tells me you do. The air left the room. We do not talk about money at the table, I said, channeling my father's sternest voice. Nonsense. Deborah waved her hand. Money is the only thing worth talking about. Liam tells me you have $50,000 sitting in an account doing absolutely nothing. That is a sin. You know, inflation is eating it alive. You should let Liam manage it. He has a brilliant financial mind. He has $12,000 in debt to his university. I blurted out. The silence that followed was deafening. I had not meant to say it. It just slipped out. A defense mechanism against her condescension. Liam's face went white, then red. Deborah did not even blink. She slowly picked up her napkin and dabbed the corners of her mouth. Every great man starts with debt, she said coldly. It is called leverage. If you understood finance, you would know that, but clearly, you are content to let your potential rot in a savings account while my son tries to build an empire. She stood up. I have lost my appetite. Liam, turn down the bed. I need a nap. And Avery, please do the dishes quietly. I am a light sleeper. She walked to my bed, kicked off her shoes, and crawled under my duvet. The duvet I had bought with my first paycheck. She claimed my space, my comfort, and my sanctuary. Liam looked at me. For a second, I thought he might apologize. I thought he might say, I am sorry. She is difficult. Instead, he glared at me with pure venom. You embarrassed me. He hissed. Never bring up my business in front of her again. You are lucky she is forgiving. Now clean up this mess. He turned and went to sit on the edge of the bed, whispering soothing things to his mother as she settled in. I stood by the sink, the lukewarm water running over my hands. I looked at the two of them. They were a unit, a fortress, and I was the enemy combatant they had captured. Inside my chest, something snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a tether breaking. I looked at the knife block on the counter. I looked at the risotto, perfectly cooked, despite what she said. Going into the trash. They think I am weak. The voice in my head whispered. It sounded different now. It was not my father's voice anymore. It was mine, but it was colder, sharper. They think I am a cow to be milked. They think they can take my bed, my food, and my money, and I will just say thank you because I am afraid of being alone. I turned off the tap. I dried my hands. I am going to the store, I announced flatly, to get better napkins. Good. Deborah mumbled from the bed. Get the linen ones. I grabbed my coat and walked out. I did not go to the store. I walked 3 blocks to an electronics shop. I stood in the aisle, surrounded by gadgets, my heart pounding a slow, a rhythmic drum of war. My father had taught me one thing that was actually useful. Trust, but verify. But since trust was dead, verification was all I had left. I bought the smallest, a most discreet camera they had, a tiny black cube that could be hidden inside the eye of a teddy bear or the spine of a book. I walked back to the apartment, the cold November wind drying the tears on my face. I was done crying. If they wanted a villain, if they wanted to treat me like a bank account instead of a human being, then I would show them what happens when you try to rob the wrong vault. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the warmth of my hell, clutching the small bag in my pocket. Did you get the napkins? Liam asked from the floor, where he was setting up a makeshift bed of cushions. Yes, I lead, my voice steady. I got exactly what we needed. Sleeping on a love seat designed for aesthetic appeal rather than human comfort is a specific kind of torture. For 4 nights, I had curled my body into the shape of a pretzel, my knees knocking against the armrest, my neck cricked at an unnatural angle, while the sounds of Liam and his mother snoring in my bed drifted from the other side of the room. They slept the sleep of the righteous, or perhaps the sleep of the remorseless. I woke up on Tuesday morning with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes like a persistent drumbeat. The apartment smelled of bacon and burnt toast. Deborah was already awake, wearing my silk kimono, the one I had bought in a vintage shop in Chelsea, and cooking breakfast. Good morning, sunshine, she chirped, not looking away from the skillet. You look dreadful. Bags under your eyes. Have you been drinking enough water? I sat up, groaning as my spine cracked. I am fine, just stiff. Well, hurry up, Liam called out. He was sitting at my desk, drinking coffee out of my favorite mug. You have that critique today, right? You do not want to be late. Panic surged through me. The critique. My final project for the semester was due today. I scrambled off the couch, ignoring the dizziness that washed over me, and rushed to the desk. Move. Liam, I need my laptop, I said, breathless. I need to export the files. Liam swiveled the chair, looking at me with confused innocence. He stood up, revealing the empty surface of the desk. Your laptop? He asked. It is not here. I stared at the empty space where my silver MacBook Pro usually sat. I blinked, sure that my tired eyes were deceiving me. I swept aside a stack of papers. I checked the floor. It was right here, I said, my voice rising in pitch. I was editing photos on it last night until midnight. I left it charging right here. Deborah turned off the stove and walked over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I sure, dear? You were pacing around quite a bit last night. You seemed Xiaoyu howling. 2 is greater than agitated. I was not agitated. I was working. I snapped. I dropped to my knees, checking under the bed, ignoring the piles of Deborah's clothes that littered the floor. Liam, did you move it? Why would I move your laptop? Liam scoffed. I have my own. Look, maybe you put it in your bag already? You are always doing things on autopilot. I grabbed my tote bag and dumped the contents onto the floor. Sketchbook, pencils, wallet, keys. No laptop, it is gone. I whispered. A cold dread settled in my stomach. That laptop contained my entire portfolio. It was worth $2,000, but the data inside was priceless. Maybe you left it at the studio yesterday? Liam suggested, his voice taking on a soothing, patronizing tone. You know how you get when you are stressed. Avery, you become Xiaoyu Jinghaoling. 2 is greater than forgetful. I did not leave it at the studio. I used it here last night. I screamed. Lower your voice, Deborah commanded, her face hardening. There is no need for hysteria. It is very unbecoming. Honestly, Liam, I told you she seemed unstable. This is exactly what I was talking about. I looked from Liam to Deborah. Their faces were masks of concern, but their eyes were cold. They were looking at me like I was a patient in a ward, not a person who had just been robbed. I am not unstable, I said, tears of frustration welling up. My laptop is missing. Someone took it. Who took it? Avery? Liam asked softly. Stepping closer, the door was locked. The windows are closed. It is just us here. Are you accusing my mother of stealing your computer? Xiaoyu Jinghaoling, è maggiore di no. Xiaoyu Jinghaoling. I stammered. The logic trap snapped shut. If I accused them, I was crazy. If I did not, I was forgetful. Check the studio, Liam urged, placing a hand on my shoulder. Go, run. We will keep looking here. I ran 10 blocks to the university, my chest burning, my mind racing. I tore through my designated studio space. I asked the janitor. I asked my professor. Nothing. When I walked back into the apartment an hour later, empty-handed and defeated, the atmosphere had shifted. It was heavy, suffocating. Liam and Deborah were sitting at the small dining table, drinking tea. They stopped talking the moment I entered. Well? Liam asked. I shook my head. I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. It is gone. I lost it. I must have left it on the subway, or Xiaoyu Jinghaoling. 2 is greater than, or somewhere. I am so stupid. Deborah sighed loudly. It is a tragedy. Really, such expensive equipment. But this is what happens when you do not value your possessions. Easy come, easy go. We will figure it out, Liam said. But he did not offer to help me look. He did not offer to file a police report. He just went back to sipping his tea. The loss of the laptop was a blow. But what happened 3 days later was the execution. It was Friday. The apartment was a mess of Deborah's shopping bags. She had been buying clothes with money I suspected came from Liam's gambling winnings. Or worse, pawning my things. I was looking for my grandmother's pearl necklace. It was not flashy, but it was a single strand of Akoya pearls with a white gold clasp. It was the only thing I had left of her. I wanted to wear it to a gallery opening to make myself feel dignified amidst the chaos of my life. I opened the jewelry box on my dresser Empty. The velvet cushion where the pearls usually rested was bare. My heart stopped beating for a full second. I felt the blood drain from my extremities. I clawed through the drawers. I pulled the dresser away from the wall. No, I moaned, the sound coming from deep in my throat. No, no, no. Liam walked out of the bathroom, a toothbrush hanging from his mouth. What now? My necklace, I gasped, holding up the empty box. Grandma's pearls, they are gone. Liam spat into the sink and rinsed his mouth. He walked over, wiping his face with a towel. He looked at the box, then at me. He did not look surprised. He looked resigned. Avery, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. We need to talk. About what? About where my necklace is? I cried. About your mental state, Deborah said, emerging from the bedroom. She was wearing a new silk scarf. We have been observing you. Dear, you are unraveling. I am not unraveling. My things are disappearing, I yelled, backing away from them until my back hit the wall. First the laptop, now the necklace. Things do not just walk away. They do when the person who owns them is suffering from a dissociate episode. Liam said. He used the legal and medical term with chilling confidence. I did some reading. Avery, the stress of school, the financial pressure, Sayuting-Halling, 2# is greater than it causes gaps in memory. You probably sold them. Sold them? I stared at him, horrified. I would never sell them. Are you sure? Liam pressed. You have been complaining about money nonstop. Maybe you sold them and blocked it out. It is a defense mechanism. My sister had it, Deborah interjected, shaking her head sadly. Early onset dementia mixed with paranoia. She would hide her jewelry in the trash, then accuse the maid of stealing. It was hereditary. You know, she looked at me pointedly. Does madness run in your family? Avery? Your father? Sayuting-Halling, 2# is greater than he, is quite intense. Is he not? Do not talk about my father. I hissed. We are just worried, Liam said, stepping into my personal space, boxing me in. You are losing touch with reality. You are forgetting things. You are agitated. You are paranoid. I am going to call my dad, I said, reaching for my pocket. I need to tell him. Liam's hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. It was not a lover's touch. It was a shackle. No, he said firmly. You are not calling him. Let go of me. Think about it. Avery, Liam said, his eyes boring into mine. If you call your dad right now, in this state, hysterical, crying about lost items, Sayuting-Halling, 2# is greater than what is he going to think? He already thinks you cannot handle the real world. If you tell him you lost a $2,000 laptop and a family heirloom in the span of a week, he will cut you off. He will drag you back home and lock you up. I froze. He was right. My father had zero tolerance for failure. If I called him screaming about theft without proof, he would think I was irresponsible. Or worse, he would agree with them that I was unstable. We are protecting you, Deborah said, taking a sip of her tea. We are keeping your little secret. We are handling this within the family, because that is what we are now. Family. Liam slowly released my wrist. Go, lie down. Avery, you look manic. We will look for the necklace later. Just Sayuting-Halling, Doi. Rest. I walked to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower so they could not hear me, but I did not cry. I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the tile floor, My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I had not sold the necklace. I had not lost the laptop. They were gaslighting me. They were systematically stripping me of my assets and my sanity. They wanted me to believe I was crazy so that when they finally went for the big prize, the $50,000, I would be too broken to stop them, or so that no one would believe me when I screamed. They were not family. They were vultures picking at a carcass before the animal was even dead. I reached into the pocket of my robe. My fingers closed around the small, hard plastic of the cube camera I had bought days ago. Trust, but verify. I waited until nightfall. At 3 a.m, the apartment was silent. Liam and Deborah were asleep in the bed. I crept off the love seat, moving like a ghost. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I moved to the bookshelf that stood opposite the bed and the main living area. It was cluttered with art history textbooks, novels, and small sculptures. I picked up a hollow ceramic owl, a project from my freshman ceramics class. It had a small hole in the back for firing. With trembling fingers, I placed the tiny black cube inside the owl, positioning the lens so it peeked out through the owl's decorative eye. It had a wide-angle view. It could see the bed. It could see the desk. It could see the front door. I activated the motion sensor mode with a tiny switch on the back. A small red light blinked once, then vanished. I placed the owl back on the shelf, wedged between a copy of Jansen's History of Art and a collection of Hemingway. I stood back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt sick. I felt violated. I was spying on my own boyfriend in my own home. But as I looked at Liam's sleeping form, watching his chest rise and fall under my duvet, I realized the boy I loved was dead. The thing sleeping in my bed was a stranger, and I was going to catch him. I went back to the couch, pulling the thin blanket over my shoulders. I did not sleep. I lay there with my eyes open, staring into the darkness, waiting for the tragedy to turn into evidence. I was no longer just a victim. I was a witness, and soon I would be the prosecutor. The air in the apartment felt different now. It was no longer filled with the static of confusion. It was charged with the electricity of a coming storm. I closed my eyes and visualized my pearl necklace around Deborah's neck. I visualized Liam pawning my laptop. The images fueled a cold, hard rage in the pit of my stomach. Let them think I am crazy. I thought, let them think I am weak. The camera is rolling. The art studio at the university was usually my sanctuary. It was a place of turpentine and silence, a space where the chaos of the world could be ordered onto a canvas. But today, the silence felt heavy. It felt like the drop in atmospheric pressure before a tornado touches down. I sat on my stool, staring at a half-finished portrait of a woman with no face. My brush hovering over the linen, my hand was trembling. It was a subtle tremor, barely visible to the naked eye, but I could feel it rattling my bones. I had been at the studio since 7 a.m, hiding. I was hiding from my own apartment. I was hiding from the woman sleeping in my bed and the boy who was slowly erasing my existence. But as the clock on the wall ticked past 2 p.m, a sudden, nauseating wave of intuition washed over me. It was a physical sensation, a cold hand gripping the back of my neck. Go home, the voice in my head whispered. It was not a suggestion. It was a command. I cleaned my brushes with mechanical precision. I packed my bag. I walked out of the building and into the biting November wind. The walk to my apartment usually took 20 minutes. Today, I walked it in 10. My legs moved with a purpose I did not fully understand. Driven by a morbid curiosity to see what was happening in the cage, I called a home. When I reached my building, I saw the first sign. The front door of the complex was propped open with a brick. It was a violation of building policy, something that usually only happened when someone was moving furniture or expecting a lot of guests. I climbed the 4 flights of stairs. With every step, the sound grew louder. It was a thumping bass, a rhythmic vibration that shook the dust from the banisters. It was coming from the 4th floor. It was coming from apartment 4B, my apartment. I stood in front of my own door. It was unlocked. I could hear laughter from inside, not just Liam's laughter or Deborah's raspy chuckle, but the laughter of strangers, voices I did not recognize. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It was a thick, cloying mixture of marijuana smoke, stale beer, and cheap cologne. My eyes watered as I stepped through the threshold, blinking against the haze. My sanctuary had been transformed into a frat house. There were at least 10 people crammed into my tiny 400 square foot studio. Red plastic cups littered every surface. My dining table, my bookshelf, even the floor. Someone had used my favorite ceramic bowl, a piece I had hand-thrown in my first semester, as an ashtray. It was filled with gray ash and crushed cigarette butts. I looked at my easel. It had been pushed into a corner, draped with someone's wet raincoat like a coat rack. And then I saw him. Liam was sitting in the center of the room, on the love seat I had been sleeping on for the past week. He was holding a beer in one hand and a joint in the other. He looked like a king holding court. He was laughing, his head thrown back, his throat exposed. But he was not alone on the love seat. A girl was sitting sideways, her legs draped over his lap. She was blonde, petite, and wearing a crop top made of pink sequins. She was giggling, tracing a finger down the front of Liam's shirt. My vision blurred. The rage that had been simmering in my gut for weeks suddenly boiled over, scalding everything in its path. "Get out," I screamed. The sound tore through my throat, raw and primal. It was not the voice of the polite, well-raised Avery Miller. It was the voice of a wounded animal cornered in its own den. The music stopped abruptly. Someone had hit pause on the speaker. The room plunged into a sudden, suffocating silence. 10 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. Liam looked up. He did not look guilty. He looked annoyed. He slowly removed the girl's hand from his chest, but he did not push her off his lap. "Avery," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are home early. Get out," I repeated, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "Everyone, get out of my apartment. Now." A guy in a backward baseball cap stood up from the floor, holding a half-eaten slice of pizza. "Whoa, chill out, babe," he slurred. "We are just vibing." "I am not your babe," I snapped, stepping forward and kicking a red cup across the floor. It skidded and hit the wall, splashing stale beer onto the baseboards. "Get out before I call the police." The word police seemed to cut through the haze. The guests exchanged nervous glances. They were college kids, mostly under 21. They did not want trouble. Slowly, they began to grab their coats and bags. Liam stood up, dumping the girl onto the love seat. He marched over to me, his face twisted in fury. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, grabbing my arm and squeezing hard. "You are embarrassing me in front of my friends." "Friends?" I laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "These are not friends, Liam. These are parasites, just like you." He shoved me backward. I stumbled but caught myself against the wall. The last of the guests hurried out the door, casting pitying looks at me before disappearing into the hallway. The girl in the pink sequins was the last to leave. She looked me up and down, smirked, and whispered, "Sorry, not sorry," as she sashayed past. Liam slammed the door shut and locked it. He turned to face me. The mask was gone. There was no charm left, no sweetness, just cold, hard malice. "You ruined my networking event," he spat. "Networking event?" I pointed at the beer cans and the haze of smoke. "You were cheating on me in my own house. You were holding that girl like she was yours." "She is a colleague," Liam shouted. "She is in my study group. We were bonding." God, you are so insecure. It is pathetic. This is exactly what my mother was talking about. Your jealousy is making you delusional. Do not bring your mother into this, I said, my voice shaking. "Where is she? Where is Deborah?" "Right here, dear." The bedroom door opened. Deborah stepped out. She was not wearing the silk kimono anymore. She was dressed in black, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She held a handkerchief to her mouth. She walked into the living room, stepping over the trash without looking at it. She looked at Liam, then at me. "Avery," she said, her voice trembling with a theatrical fragility. "We need to sit down. We have a crisis." I looked at them. The transition was seamless. One moment, Liam was a raging party animal, and the next, he was the concerned son standing next to his grieving mother. It was a performance. I knew it was a performance because the camera in the owl was watching it all. "I am not sitting down," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "I want you both out. Tonight, I want my key back." Deborah let out a sob. She collapsed onto the love seat, burying her face in her hands. "How can you be so cruel?" Liam shouted, rushing to his mother's side. "Can you not see she is in pain?" "What is going on?" I asked. Despite myself, Liam looked up at me, his eyes wet with instant tears. "She just got off the phone with her doctor in Virginia," he said, his voice breaking. "The test results came back. It is her heart. Avery, she needs surgery. Immediately. A valve replacement. If she does not get it within 48 hours, she, Xiaoyu Jingho, Ling, 2# is greater than she could die." I stared at Deborah. She was shaking, her shoulders heaving. "I am so sorry to be a burden." Deborah wailed into her handkerchief. "I did not want to tell you. I did not want to ruin your semester. But the insurance, Xiaoyu Jingho Ling, 2# is greater than they will not cover the out-of-network specialist. They need cash up front." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I knew exactly where this was going. "How much?" I asked. $50,000. Liam said instantly. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I almost laughed. It was too perfect. Exactly the amount they thought was in my trust fund. 50,000. I repeated. "That is a lot of money. It is a life." "Avery," Liam screamed, standing up and advancing on me. "It is my mother's life. You have the money sitting there, rotting, doing nothing. You can save her." I looked at Deborah. She lowered the handkerchief slightly. Her eyes were dry. They were sharp, calculating, waiting for my reaction. "I cannot touch that money," I said quietly. "I told you. It is frozen. Liar." Liam slammed his fist against the wall next to my head. I flinched. "You are a liar." I saw the statement. "It is a standard checking account. You can write a check right now. You just do not want to. You are selfish. You are a spoiled little rich girl who would rather see a woman die than part with her daddy's money." He was in my face now, his breath smelling of beer and aggression. Write the check. Avery, he commanded. Write it now. Sao yu ting hao ling, due cancelletto e maggiore di. No, I said. The word hung between us. Simple. Final. Liam stared at me. His nostrils flared. He looked back at his mother. Deborah stopped crying immediately. She sat up straight, smoothing her hair. The frail, dying woman vanished. In her place sat a general commanding her soldier. She is not going to do it out of the goodness of her heart. Liam, Deborah said coldly, we have to use the other option. Liam nodded. He stepped back, blocking the path to the door. Deborah stood up and walked to the kitchen counter. She picked up my phone, which I had foolishly left charging there when I came in. Hey, I shouted, lunging forward. Give that back. Liam caught me. He grabbed me by the shoulders and shoved me hard. I flew backward, tripping over the leg of the love seat and falling onto the floor. My elbow slammed against the hardwood, sending a jolt of pain up my arm. Sit down, Liam growled. Deborah held my phone up. She smiled. It was a terrifying, tight-lipped smile. Here is the situation, Avery, she said, her voice calm and professional. We have been very worried about you. You have been acting erratically. You have been forgetting things. You have been violent. Just now, you attacked my son. You threw things. You were screaming. I did not attack him, I yelled, scrambling to my feet. Who are they going to believe? Deborah asked. Two calm, rational adults? Or the girl who has a history of daddy issues and running away? She tapped the screen of my phone. We are going to make a deal, she continued. You are going to write a check for $50,000 to the Carter Family Emergency Fund. In exchange, we will leave. We will walk out that door and never come back. And if I do not, I challenged, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I make a call. Deborah said, I call the police. I call your university. And I call your father. I tell them that you had a psychotic break. I tell them you threatened to kill yourself. I tell them we found drugs in your room. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag filled with white powder. She tossed it onto the coffee table. Liam put that there earlier, she said, just in case. My blood ran cold. They had planted drugs. They had a story. They had witnesses. The party guests who saw me screaming and kicking things. If I make that call, Deborah continued, you will be put on a 5150 hold, 72 hours in a psychiatric ward. Your father will be humiliated. The school will expel you. And your father, being the controlling man you say he is, will almost certainly file for a conservatorship. He will lock you up and throw away the key. You will never paint again. You will never be free again. She paused, letting the horror of her threat sink in. Or, she said softly, you can pay the medical bill. You can be the hero. You save a life, and you keep your freedom. It is a small price to pay. Do you not think? I looked at Liam. He was crossing his arms, leaning against the door. He looked bored. He looked like he was waiting for a transaction to clear. This is extortion, I whispered. It is family business. Liam corrected. I looked at the owl on the bookshelf. The glass eye glinted in the dim light. It had seen the shove. It had heard the threat. It had seen the bag of drugs. Inner monologue raced through my mind. If I say no, they call the police. I go to the psych ward. By the time I get out and prove I am sane, my life is ruined. My father will never trust me again. But But if I say yes, Soyutsing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than if I write the check. Soyutsing Haoling, or Tsing Hao Dayu. I needed them to incriminate themselves further. I needed it to be undeniable. You promise you will leave? I asked, letting my voice tremble. You promise you will take the money and go? I promise, Liam said, his eyes lighting up with greed. Just write the check. Avery, we will be out of your hair in an hour. And the laptop? I asked. The necklace? Deborah waved her hand dismissively. Collateral. We will mail the pawn tickets to you once the check clears. They admitted it. They admitted to the theft. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let the tears finally fall. But they were not tears of defeat. They were tears of relief. I had them. I had everything I needed. Okay, I whispered. Okay, I will do it. Liam grinned. It was the smile of a man who thought he had just won the lottery. He walked over and patted me on the head, like a dog that had finally obeyed a command. Good girl, he said. I knew you would make the right choice. He did not know that the choice I made was not to pay them. The choice I made was to destroy them. I stood up, nursing my bruised elbow, and walked toward my desk to find my checkbook. My hands were shaking, but my mind was as cold as ice. The confrontation was over. The execution was about to begin. My hand was steady as I uncapped the pen. The ink flowed onto the paper, dark and permanent, carving out the numbers that Liam and Deborah believed would be their salvation. I wrote the date. I wrote the name, Deborah Carter, and then, on the line where the value belonged, I wrote the words $50,000. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the scratching of the nib against the checkbook. Liam was breathing hard, a sound of suppressed excitement that bordered on arousal. Deborah was watching me like a hawk, her fake tears drying instantly, replaced by the greedy calculation of a predator watching its prey bleed out. I tore the check from the book. The perforated edge made a ripping sound that echoed in the small apartment. Here, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I held it out. Liam snatched it from my fingers before I could even fully extend my arm. He looked at it, his eyes scanning the numbers, the signature, the amount. A wide, triumphant grin split his face. See, he said, turning to his mother and waving the check like a flag of victory. I told you she would come around. I told you she just needed a little push. Deborah took the check from him. She examined it with the scrutiny of a bank teller. Holding it up to the light, she folded it neatly and tucked it into her bra. You made the right choice. Avery, she said, her voice dripping with that sickening, patronizing sweetness. Again, you saved a life today. You should feel proud. Not everyone has the capacity for such generosity. You promised you would leave, I said, leaning back against the desk. You have the money. Now get out. Of course, Liam said. He walked over to the closet and grabbed his coat. We are men of our word. We will go pack our bags. We will be out of here in 10 minutes. He paused, looking at me with a smirk. Do not look so gloomy. Babe, think of this as a tuition fee. You learned a valuable lesson about family loyalty today. And hey, maybe once Mom is better, we can try again. I might even forgive you for the way you acted earlier. The audacity was breathtaking. He had just extorted me, threatened to ruin my life, and planted drugs in my home. And he was talking about forgiveness. Just go, I whispered, as they turned their backs to head toward the bedroom to pack. I slipped my left hand under the desk. I pressed the side button of my Apple Watch. I held it for 3 seconds. A subtle vibration buzzed against my wrist. SOS signal sent. My father had set up the emergency protocol years ago. It did not just call 911. It sent a priority alert to his private security team and the local precinct captain. A man my father played golf with on Sundays. I need to use the bathroom, I announced abruptly. Make it quick. Liam called out over his shoulder. And do not try anything stupid. Remember the bag on the table. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I did not use the toilet. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the door handle, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I could hear them in the other room. They were not packing quietly. They were laughing. We should go to St. Bart's for recovery, I heard Deborah say. I need some sun. My complexion is gray from all this stress. Definitely, Liam replied, and I need a new suit. This one smells like that cheap beer. They had forgotten the heart surgery lie the moment the check touched their hands. 5 minutes passed, then 7, then the sound came. It started as a distant wail, rising and falling through the canyon of the city streets. Sirens, not one, but many. They grew louder, layering over each other in a chaotic symphony of urgency. The laughter in the other room stopped. What is that? Deborah's voice was sharp. It is probably a fire truck. Liam dismissed. Relax. Mom. The sirens cut off abruptly right outside our building. Then came the heavy thud of car doors slamming, the sound of boots on the stairs. Heavy, authoritative footsteps echoing up the stairwell. I stood up and unlocked the bathroom door. I stepped out into the living room just as a fist pounded on my front door. Police. Open up. The color drained from Liam's face. He looked at the door, then at me. His eyes went wide with panic, then narrowed into pure hatred. You called them, he said. You little witch. You called them. Open the door. The voice boomed again. Deborah grabbed Liam's arm. The drugs, she whispered frantically. The story? Stick to the story. Liam composed himself instantly. He grabbed the bag of white powder from the coffee table and shoved it into his pocket. He smoothed his hair, put on a look of extreme distress, and unlocked the door. He swung it open. 3 uniformed officers stood there, hands resting near their holsters. Behind them, I could see my neighbors peering out of their doorways. Mistress Gable from 4C, who always complained about noise. The young couple from 4A. They were all watching. This was the public fallout Liam had threatened me with, but he was about to weaponize it. Thank God you are here, Liam screamed, throwing his hands up. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Officer, please help. My girlfriend is having a psychotic break. She is violent. She has drugs. I tried to de-escalate, but she threatened to kill my mother. The lead officer, a tall man with a stern face, stepped into the apartment. He looked at Liam, then at Deborah, who was cowering on the sofa, clutching her chest. Then he looked at me. I stood by the bathroom door, my arms crossed, my face calm. Is this true? Ma'am? The officer asked me. She is on something, Liam yelled, playing to the audience in the hallway. Look at her eyes. She is manic. She has cocaine in the apartment. I tried to flush it, but she attacked me. He pulled the bag out of his pocket and held it up like evidence. See? I took this from her, from the hallway. I heard Mistress Gable gasp. I knew it. She whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I knew that girl was trouble, always coming and going at odd hours. The shame washed over me. Even though I was the victim, the accusation hung in the air like a foul smell. To the world, to my neighbors, I was the crazy girl. I was the drug addict. My reputation, the independent life I had tried so hard to build, was being shredded in front of an audience. "Step out of the apartment, sir," the officer ordered Liam. "But she is dangerous," Liam insisted, trying to push past the officer to grab me. "You need to arrest her. She needs a psych evaluation." I said, "Step out," the officer barked. He pushed Liam back toward the hallway. Another officer approached me. "Ma'am, are you injured?" I looked at Liam. He was standing in the hallway now, surrounded by the neighbors. He was still shouting, spinning his narrative, trying to destroy me to save himself. "She stole money from her parents," Liam shouted to the crowd. "She is mentally unstable. We were just trying to help her." I took a deep breath. I walked over to the bookshelf. I reached up and pulled down the ceramic owl. "Officer," I said, my voice cutting through Liam's shouting. It was quiet, steady, and cold. "I am not on drugs, and I am not having a breakdown." I turned the owl over and popped the small black cube out of the base. "But I do have a security camera," I said, holding the tiny device up, "and it has been recording for the last 48 hours. It recorded them planting those drugs. It recorded them hitting me, and it recorded them extorting me for $50,000. The silence that fell over the hallway was instant. Liam stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. Deborah froze on the couch. "Also," I added, looking directly at the lead officer, "my name is Avery Miller. Robert Miller is my father. He is on his way, and I believe he would like to press charges." The officer's eyes widened slightly at the mention of my father's name. He looked at the camera in my hand, then back at Liam. "Cuff him," the officer said. "What?" Liam shrieked as the second officer grabbed his wrist. "No, she is lying. That is a fake camera. Mom, do something." But Deborah did not do anything. She sat on the love seat, her face pale as a sheet. She knew the game was over. As the officer clicked the handcuffs onto Liam's wrists, the neighbors did not look at me with disdain anymore. They looked at Liam. The whispers changed. "Extortion? He hit her? What a scumbag." Liam was dragged toward the stairs, kicking and screaming. "Avery, tell them to stop. I love you. Avery, please. It was just a misunderstanding." I walked to the door and watched him disappear down the stairwell. The public fallout he had orchestrated had indeed happened, but the shame was not mine. I turned back to the room. Deborah was trying to stand up, clutching her handbag, the bag with my check inside. "Sit down," the officer told her. "You are not going anywhere." I stood in the center of my ruined apartment. The floor was sticky with beer. My easel was knocked over. My neighbors were staring at me with a mixture of pity and awe. I had won, but I did not feel triumphant. I felt exposed. I felt exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept me standing was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache in my bones. But it was not over yet. They still had the check, and they still thought they had won the money, even if they lost their freedom. I looked at Deborah, who was now weeping real tears as the officer read her rights. "You can keep the check," I whispered to myself. "It will be a nice souvenir for your prison cell." The flashing red and blue lights from the police cruisers parked outside danced across my ceiling, casting long, erratic shadows that looked like frantic ghosts. The apartment, once filled with the chaotic noise of Liam's shouting and the neighbors' whispers, had settled into a clinical, devastating silence. It was the kind of quiet that follows a bomb blast, a ringing in the ears that drowns out the world. 2 officers were bagging the evidence. The tiny black cube camera was placed into a plastic bag. The bag of white powder Deborah had tossed onto the table followed suit. Deborah Carter sat on my love seat, her hands cuffed behind her back. The theatrics were gone. The dying woman act had evaporated, leaving behind a husk of bitter, trembling rage. She stared at the floor, muttering to herself, clutching her handbag with her cuffed hands as if it contained the crown jewels. "You have the check?" She hissed at the officer, standing guard over her. "It is in my bag. $50,000. It was a gift." She signed it. "It is a legal contract." The officer, a young woman with a tired expression, ignored her. I stood by the window, wrapping my arms around myself. The adrenaline that had fueled my performance was draining away, leaving me shivering and nauseous. I looked at the woman who had invaded my home, worn my clothes, and tried to destroy my life. "It will bounce," I said softly. Deborah's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, and venomous. "What did you say?" She spat. I turned to face her. I felt a strange sense of pity, not for her situation, but for her stupidity. "The check," I said, my voice steady but hollow. "It is worthless." "That bank account? The one Liam found the statement for? It is not a trust fund. It is not an inheritance." I walked over to the desk and picked up the original bank statement Liam had pinned to the corkboard like a trophy. I ripped it off the wall. "My father calls this a honeypot," I explained, looking at the paper. "He set up a dummy account with a fake balance when I moved to the city. He sends me these statements every month to leave around the apartment. He told me, 'Avery, if a boy ever finds this and suddenly wants to marry you, run.'" I crumpled the paper in my hand and dropped it onto the floor next to Deborah's feet. "There is no $50,000. Deborah, there is not even 50 cents. It is a ghost account. You just committed felony extortion and drug possession for a piece of paper that is not worth the ink I signed it with." The color drained from Deborah's face so completely she looked like a corpse. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The realization hit her like a physical blow. All the planning, the manipulation, the cruelty, it was all for nothing. They had chased a mirage off a cliff. "You, Xiao Ting Haoling, 2# is greater than you, little snake," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You set us up?" "No," I said coldly. "You set yourselves up. I just let you walk into the trap. Get her out of here," the lead officer commanded. As they hauled Deborah to her feet, she began to scream. It was a guttural, ugly sound of pure despair. She screamed Liam's name. She screamed curses at me. But as the door closed behind her, cutting off the noise, I did not feel the rush of victory I had expected. I felt empty. I looked around my apartment. It was a wreck. Beer stains on the floor, my clothes pulled out of drawers, my paintings knocked over. The physical debris was manageable, but the psychological debris felt insurmountable. Every corner of this room now held a memory of their violation. The bed where they slept, the desk where Liam tracked my money, the kitchen where Deborah criticized my cooking. My sanctuary had been desecrated. A heavy knock on the open door frame broke my trance. I did not need to look to know who it was. The cadence of the knock was familiar. It was authoritative, demanding, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Daddy," I whispered. Robert Miller walked into the apartment. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat over a suit that cost more than my entire tuition. He did not look at the police officers. He did not look at the mess. His steel gray eyes locked onto me immediately. He did not rush over to hug me. He did not ask if I was okay. He stood in the doorway, removing his leather gloves with slow, precise movements. "Captain," my father nodded to the lead officer. "Mr. Miller," the officer replied with a deferential nod. "We have the situation under control. The suspects are in custody. We have the video evidence your daughter provided." "Good," my father said. "I want the maximum charges pressed. Kidnapping, extortion, grand larceny, possession with intent to distribute. Do not let them plead down." "Understood." "Sir." My father finally walked over to me. He stopped 3 feet away. He looked me up and down, assessing for physical damage. Seeing none, his expression hardened. "I told you," he said. The 3 words cut deeper than anything Liam had said to me in the last month. "I know," I said, looking down at my shoes. "I told you that playing house with these people was a mistake," he continued, his voice calm and level. "I told you that trying to live this Saoyutsing Haoling 2# is greater than bohemian lifestyle would attract parasites. You wanted to prove you were independent. Avery, is this what independence looks like?" He gestured around the room at the chaos. I handled it. I argued weakly, tears stinging my eyes. I got the evidence. I called the police. I protected myself. You let them in. My father corrected me. You let a wolf into your bed because you were too afraid to be alone. You let them stay because you were too polite to kick them out. You fed them. You nurtured them. You only fought back when they put a knife to your throat. Hisihud, a sound of deep disappointment. Smart people do not win wars. Avery, smart people avoid them entirely. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check, a real one this time. He placed it on the desk. "Hire a cleaning crew," he said. "Pack your things. The driver is downstairs. You are coming home tonight. Saoyutsing Haoling 2# is greater than I have classes tomorrow." I stammered. "You are withdrawing for the semester," he stated, turning his back on me. "You are clearly not ready for the real world. We will discuss your return to school when you have learned how to judge character." He walked out of the apartment, his footsteps echoing down the hall. I stood there, alone again. The police were leaving. The door was broken. I had defeated Liam. I had defeated Deborah. I had sent them to prison. But as I looked at the check my father had left on the desk, I realized I had lost something much more valuable than money. I had proven my father right, and that was a debt I would be paying for the rest of my life. The movers had come and gone in less than 2 hours. They were efficient, silent men paid for by my father to erase the last month of my life. My apartment, once cluttered with my art, Liam's dirty laundry, and Deborah's overwhelming perfume, was now a hollow white box. The smell of bleach hung heavy in the air, masking the lingering scent of stale beer and betrayal. I sat on the floor in the center of the room, my legs crossed. The hardwood was cold against my jeans. In my hand, I held a crumpled piece of thermal paper I had found while sweeping out the dust bunnies from under the coat rack. It was the receipt from the steakhouse. 6 months ago, the night the deception began. I smoothed out the wrinkles with my thumb, staring at the faded ink. Wagyu beef, Cabernet Sauvignon, total $340. I remembered how I felt that night. I remembered the knot in my stomach, the desperate need to believe his lie about the forgotten wallet because the alternative, that he was using me, was too painful to accept. I had paid that bill not out of generosity, but out of fear. I was afraid of rocking the boat. I was afraid of being difficult. I was afraid that if I demanded respect, I would end up alone. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the apartment, somewhere in a holding cell at the precinct down the street. Liam and Deborah were currently screaming at public defenders. My father's lawyer had called me 20 minutes ago with an update. They were being charged with attempted extortion, grand larceny, and possession of a controlled substance because of the amount they tried to extort. $50,000. It was a felony class crime. Liam would not be going to law school. He would not be trading stocks. He would be trading cigarettes for protection in a cell block. He wanted a free ride, and he got one. The state would now pay for his housing and his meals for the next 5 to 7 years. It was the ultimate justice. It was the instant karma that everyone loves to see in movies. But as I sat there, I did not feel like a winner. I looked at the check my father had left on the desk. It was still there. He had written it for $10,000, enough to cover the move, the lost laptop, and the stolen jewelry. He treated the whole ordeal like a business transaction, a bad investment written off as a loss. I reached out and picked up the check. For years, I had hated my father for his coldness. I hated how he viewed every relationship as a ledger of debts and credits. I ran away to art school to prove I was different, to prove that love could be unconditional. But looking at the empty space where Liam used to sleep, I realized the terrifying truth. My father was right. There is no such thing as unconditional love when you are dealing with emotional terrorists. My kindness was not a virtue. It was a vulnerability. My desire to fix Liam, to save him from his debts, to house his mother, was not benevolence. It was a weakness. It was a desperate, pathetic attempt to buy affection, because I did not believe I deserved it for free. I had let a vampire into my house, offered him my neck, and then acted surprised when he drank my blood. I stood up, dusting off my jeans. I walked over to the trash can, the only item left in the room. I held the steakhouse receipt over the bin. I ripped it in half, then in quarters. I let the pieces flutter down into the darkness. Then, I looked at my father's check. The old Avery would have torn this up too. The old Avery would have marched out of here with her head held high, refusing his money, determined to struggle on her own terms. But the old Avery was an idiot who got robbed by her boyfriend. I folded the $10,000 check and slid it into my pocket. I walked to the door and took one last look at the apartment. It was small. It was dark. It was the place where my innocence went to die. I stepped out into the hallway and locked the door behind me. I dropped the key through the mail slot. It made a final, metallic clatter as it hit the floor inside. I walked down the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Outside, a black town car was waiting. The driver, a man named Marcus, who had worked for my father for a decade, stepped out and opened the rear door. Home. "Miss Miller?" he asked. I slid into the leather seat. It was warm and smelled of expensive conditioner. "Yes, Marcus," I said, leaning back and watching the city pass by through the tinted glass. "Take me home." I was going back to my father's world, but I was not going back as a victim. I was going back as a student. I needed to learn how to spot the Liams and the Deborahs of the world before they made it through the front door. I needed to learn how to be the shark, so I would never again be the bait. I touched the pocket where the check lay against my hip. Liam called me cheap. He was wrong. I was expensive. And today, I finally realized my own worth.